All right, here we go. If you're coming to this video via Travel Weekly, then you're very familiar with my next guest, Arnie Weissmann. He is the editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly. He speaks at a lot of conferences, has a lot of great insights on travel and tourism, and so what we usually do when we meet up and have a chat at the bar or wherever is we discuss what are the best practices that destinations are doing around the world, and we kind of swap back and forth. So I thought a great place to start with Arnie would be, give me your top 5 most interesting best practices around the world. Arnie, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Thanks for inviting me. I would say number one, and I'll talk about some trends that I'm seeing that I think are very positive for tourism. So leading that would be this kind of rise in community-based tourism. And community-based tourism is pretty much an idea where it is the community that directs how tourism develops. So it can take I'll give you two different extremes. So one of them, I don't know if you saw this video that came out, Miami Beach just has had it with spring breakers. And I have never seen a destination give the finger to potential visitors quite the way Miami Beach did in a video. And they are just saying, you come, you're going to have a miserable time. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to hassle you. So that's on the one hand, the community saying enough. But there's also...
Can I just stop you right there for 1 second? Let me just interrupt you. I want to make sure I understand you fully, because there were maybe 15, 20 years ago, Barcelona was writing tourists go home, or the people were writing that. And then is community-based, is that when the actual tourism authority, the DMO, sort of says, we're going to actually embrace that idea. We're going to also agree with whoever wrote tourists go home and stand up for that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
In this case, it wasn't the DMO, it was the city of Miami Beach.
Okay.
So when I looked at this, I actually called the DMO first, thinking that they had done it, and they said, not us. It's so I found it was the city of Miami Beach. I called them. It's on YouTube if you want to look at it. It's in the public domain if you want to slip it into this broadcast. I think that would be great.
Hey, we need to talk.
This isn't working anymore.
And it's not us, it's you. We just want different things.
Our idea of a good time is relaxing on the beach.
Hitting up the spa.
Or checking out a new restaurant.
You just want to get drunk in public and ignore laws.
Do you even remember what happened last March?
That was our breaking point, so we're breaking up with you.
And don't try to apologize and come crawling back. This isn't safe, so we're done.
And just so you know, we're serious.
This March, you can expect things like curfews, bag checks, and restricted beach access.
DUI checkpoints, $100 parking, and strong police enforcement for drug possession and violence.
Whatever it takes, because it's time to move on.
Maybe we can talk when you're done with your spring break phase, but until then.
So that's sort of the cautionary tale. That's how what can happen when things go really wrong and the community pushes back.
What did the DMO say when you spoke to them? Like when they asked about, like, so their job, so the city's saying don't come, and the DMO's job is to say come. How does that work?
Yeah. The DMO just sort of said that wasn't us. That wasn't us. Here's the number for City Hall. So it is. I mean, there is more and more. Probably 5-6 years ago, it was. We need to call these destination, instead of destination marketing organizations, destination management organizations. I have heard it is now management. I haven't heard one person say marketing in years.
I think it's kind of wild when I ask you, I mean, you're as knowledgeable as anybody in this industry. And when I ask you, what's your number one thing that you like and best practice about tourism, you say keeping tourists away.
Well, management. So in the case, on the one hand, Miami Beach is the cautionary tale. I'll give you an example where I think it's brilliantly done. And this goes back quite a ways, actually, into the 1990s. There's a small village in Mexico called Cabo Pulmo. And Cabo Pulmo is about an hour and a half north of Cabo San Lucas, Los Cabos, the very big and popular tourist destination. So Cabo Pulmo, overfishing was a problem. It was a fishing village. And so there's a fisherman, his last name is Castro. I'm trying to remember his first name. But anyways, it was a fisherman who decided, I can't make a living fishing anymore. So he actually went, he liked to dive. So he went to Cabo San Lucas, got a job in a dive shop, and the people he didn't like it. It was too fast for him. The living was too fast. So he came back to Cabo Pulmo, and he decided, a dive shop probably isn't a bad idea here. We have a reef, but because the overfishing was also hurting that one business, there was also the overfishing was going to be hurting his dive business if he did that. So he went to the universities and got some experts and said, will you help me protect this reef so that it can get we can get fish back? And he reached out to the people in the village and said, we need to get this under control. Through his efforts and the university backup, he got the area in front of the village made into a national reserve so that it had all sorts of regulations around it about fishing. So fish started coming back. Then he went further and he got it made into a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which, although it doesn't have any enforceable regulations, it gives it certain protections and certain status that's very good. So everything's going along. He said, we're beginning to have a problem with visibility because there were too many fish. He couldn't, that was kind of his joke about it, was it was really working. Then in 2016, a big Spanish development company wanted to build it was going to be at that time as big as Cancun, 6 miles down the coast from him. And so this got approved by the Federal Department of Environmental Regulation. And so this was going to undo everything that he had been working for. So he went to Spain. He tried to talk to the government and said, you've got to stop your company from doing this. He got Greenpeace involved. And the most effective thing was his son went to the Zocalo in Mexico City, the main square in Mexico City, on a bicycle dressed up like a fish. And he had a petition. He had a petition with 2,000 signatures. And that stunt got him an audience with the then president, Felipe Calderon. And Calderon looked at it, looked at the situation, looked at the petition, said, we're changing the regulation. I'm overriding my Department of Environment. And so now the community runs it. So I visited. There's like 2 or 3 dive shops. He's got some competition. He's fine with that. Yeah. But all the dive shops have to coordinate because they only allow a certain number of boats out per day. There can't be more than 6 divers on any boat. They can only go to certain spots. Snorkelers have to wear a life vest so that they can't dive down and possibly touch the coral. And it's, this huge success. So this was a case where it really, the community just said, we don't want all the tourism we can have. And it's like a sleepy Mexican village like you used to see on the coast. It's great.
I had 2 things I was thinking while you were saying that, and it's a wonderful story, but it pains me that it's so rare. That it's like the military-industrial complex of tourism that just plays out again and again, and I just wish it wasn't this difficult when it seems so obvious to so many people that this is what's strangling tourism. They say when the tourists love a place to death. And the other lighter thing that I was thinking of while you were saying that when a place is overfished, the fishes disappear. When a place is over-touristed, there's too many tourists. Something a little backwards about this. But before we're only on thing 1. I want to get to make sure we get to thing number 2 on your list of best practice around the world.
Yeah. So the other is, and this is a small but growing, kind of significantly growing movement, and it was started by the nonprofit Tourism Cares. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's very much. The membership is very much the tourism industry. Very large tour operators are members and things. And they've launched something called, the initiative was called the Meaningful Map. And I think broader in a broader context is sort of meaningful travel. And they started with the country of Jordan. It's now hit 24 destinations where they've created these meaningful maps that focus on local social enterprises that are doing that to get the money from tourists to go to off the beaten tourist track. Now, if you're in Jordan, yes, you're going to see Petra, you're going to see Jerash, you're going to go to Amman. But these are sometimes out of the way, off the tourist track places. There is a place called something El Arak. It's a community that has a large number of women refugees, and they've come together and they made in a building. They sort of do traditional crafts and they sell them, but nobody was coming to them because you have to really be wanting to go there in order to get there. So they created, I think there are 16 places in Jordan where if you want to have an experience that's better, and what's great about it being a Tourism Cares initiative is that the tour operators have started adding these to their itineraries so that you get people who otherwise would never think to go to a community. And now the Women's Refugee Cooperative has a restaurant, has a proper gift shop. I went there when it was kind of in its early stages and you just kind of looked through piles of things on a table. Now it's very, very organized. So the industry is actually working to bring economic benefit of tourism to places that otherwise wouldn't get it. And it's not going to be overrun. I mean, these are places that are a little bit off the beaten track, but that are doing wonderful things.
One of the things is that, I mean, I'm hearing you saying that it's a big thing to get the money to stay in the local economy and help the locals. Yeah. It seems like a pushback that this is not happening often enough. It's too often these global players move in and siphon the money, and often the money never even arrives, let alone gets shipped out immediately or yo-yos back out. It doesn't even get there sometimes. But this seems to be another sort of modern ailment of the tourism industry. So first we have too many tourists that take over the place, and the second thing is the money doesn't stay. I'm curious what's...
Yeah, well, 3 is something completely different, which is what I'm excited about is space travel. I've always been excited about space travel, but it's always been either it's always a very expensive proposition, and billionaires going up in rockets, and there was that promise of Virgin Galactic that has taken so long, and they kind of got leapfrogged maybe by some of these other people. The one that really excites me are the space balloons, and these are environmentally friendly. It uses I think they're zero carbon, and they go up and pretty much zero training to go on these things. It's like taking an elevator to space. It goes up at like 12 miles an hour, goes into dark space. You can look down. You don't see the whole of Earth the way that an astronaut would way up in space. But you could see, for instance, all of the Florida Peninsula, and in from dark space, and look up and see the full stars. So I'm very excited about that. I think that is, and the one that's furthest along is a company called Space Perspective. They are going to be testing and it's a luxury experience. It's sort of, when I say it's within reach, it's like $250,000. So it goes from billionaires to millionaires.
Wow.
Is where the accessibility. But I think when you think about air travel and how initially it was really for the wealth, if this takes off, literally, then I could see this having franchises around the world, and it would, presumably, bring the price down. Right now, it's about, the reservations are through, I think, they're almost towards 2030 at this point.
If we're going to stick with bad travel metaphors, I don't want to burst your bubble on this, but I would sort of, I need to push back a little, in just that I've grown up with Star Wars and all these, where people who were into space were actually in space. This feels like junior varsity space. Like you're going up and you're kind of like, it's like one of those kind of pull-ups where you just kind of get your chin up to the bar barely, and you're not really in it. You're not, flying.
It's good. It's better than, yeah. It's better than virtual reality. It is real, and you're right in that you are not going into, and it's not even deep space. You're not going to the highest level of the atmospheres. But and the reason it's called Space Perspective, that one company, is there's something that every astronaut that's ever gone up into really high space has experienced called the overview effect. And the overview effect is deeply moving to everyone who's been in space because they're looking down at a globe without borders. They don't see, that it just goes, oh my God, we have this fragile little craft, you could say, floating around in the great universe that if we mess it up, and we can mess it up so many different ways, not just environmentally, but forgetting that we are one species, inhabiting this globe. And so you do get high enough, they say, to experience this overview effect, and that would be fabulous. If you get enough volume of people understanding the importance of the environment and actually getting along, that would be a wonderful thing.
I think the price needs to come down a little bit before we can have some kind of a global understanding from that.
Heck.
Is the poor man's version of that to have the door of the aircraft blown off mid-flight? Alaska Airlines style. Yeah. No, we don't want that to happen. I'm just saying it might be more likely than putting up millions of people at that price tag you mentioned.
Yeah. And well, hopefully it'll come down. Look at 50, when Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, it was headline news around the world. Last year, 53 million people crossed the Atlantic. So things can happen. Of course, there's some practical aspects of that, but a lot of it's tourism.
Definitely heading that way. Okay, we're on to number 4.
Yeah, and this is something I've been talking about. I'm glad this thing has been given a name, and that is what they call Dupes, where you go to a destination that is similar to a destination that's experiencing over-tourism, or is just too crowded, or somehow a miserable experience. And we have to fight with all the other tourists for any tourist resource that you might want, whether it's in a restaurant or whatever. And with a dupe, you find something that's similar that you can visit that's much more pleasant.
So you're not talking about the Venetian in Vegas or these or Venice, California, the kind of fake wannabe dupes. You're talking about like an accidental dupe that happens to be kind of nearby, that's kind of similar, maybe doesn't have the museums or the canals, or has some aspects of it, or similar enough, but just unheard of. And then second follow-up question to that is, what happens when that gets crowded? Aren't we just kicking the can down the road?
If it is done right, then early on, again, planning is so important. When you see yourself becoming a popular tourist destination, to put in how you want to see tourism develop. I think the world's a big place. The thing that has been a difficult thing for places that aren't prepared is social media. Someone takes a picture of themselves, posts it on Instagram. They have 1 million followers. All of a sudden, everybody wants to go to that place. That's probably one of the most destructive habits that impacts tourism. I don't think about that. It doesn't actually have to be nearby. I'll give you another example of a dupe that, at least for Americans, is probably something they wouldn't think of. So, and this has to do with cost. It has to do with crowding, everything. So Hawaii, beautiful, fantastic. The Azores Islands now has a number of direct flights from the U.S., and they're about 2/3 of the way across the Atlantic. They're an autonomous region of Portugal. And they have so many similarities to Hawaii, and some differences that Hawaii doesn't have that I think are quite interesting. They're volcanic. They have volcanic features. You can climb a volcano. Lush green, mountainous, beautiful area. The Europeans know about it, so in high season, it's not like you're going to be alone. But I've gone off season. I've sort of become a big Azores fan.
Interesting. Okay, and what's number 5?
Number 5 is an awareness, an increasing awareness for accessible travel. And
Cool.
this is something, yeah. And as you know, the boomers are getting to the point where they're going to need it, and it's going to be economically advantageous to make sure that your destination is accessible for as many people as you can, because people who have time and money are those who are retired, and they're beginning to also find that they're maybe not as robust as they were when they were younger. So I see that as a very, very positive trend, and one that it will only increase as we go on and as the boomers begin to age more and more.
Interesting. You know, I saw recently on YouTube on 60 Minutes Australia version that there is a place, I think it's in Thailand, where a lot of elderly retired Australians are going to have like nursing home care that's off the charts in quality for a fraction of the price. So it's like a hotel that kind of converted or specialized, being extremely accessible, but then also having that nursing staff in place and attracting long-term guests.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that could be an interesting add-on to what you're saying in this terms of a trend of what might just be starting to gain steam. I mean, it made it enough on the radar to jump onto 60 Minutes Australia. It's not hard to imagine, as hotels are looking for something to distinguish themselves or fill up in the off season, that appealing to a certain crowd, especially if it's a place with cheap labor costs, could be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, what's nice about that is so that medical tourism is not new. And for instance, a lot of people have packaged get a nose job and see a safari, and you're just going to go off to Africa. Your friends won't know because you'll have the 2 or 3 weeks to heal, and all the bruising goes away.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of already cosmetic medical things and wellness and things like that have been going on for a while. But this idea of retirement I think will also accelerate it.
Truth be told, Arnie and I spoke for about another hour and a half before we got off the phone. I had to shorten this down, but we're going to do another piece soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.